We've already discussed how Nmap is a very popular network scanner that can identify hosts that are running on your network, but not only that, it can identify the services that are running on those hosts. So it's time that we took a look at how to do that both using the Nmap command line tool and the front-end Nmap GUI. So let's start by opening up a command prompt on a Windows host where I've already downloaded and installed the free Nmap tool. So in a command prompt, I can verify that Nmap is available simply by typing Nmap itself. And immediately I can see it gives me some help information. So of course I know that Nmap is successfully installed. Now you have to do this because it's not included automatically with the Windows environment. So let's get started with this. If I do ipconfig, we know it will return some details about our IP configuration, including our IP address, which identifies the subnet that we're on. Now that can be important because if you want to scan devices on your local area network, you're going to have to know what the network address is that's being used. However, you could be on your local area network and you could reach out to anywhere and perform a network scan with Nmap. Now this is very loud, as we said. In other words, don't think you're going to be able to do this against the Pentagon without some alarm bells being set off on their side. So be very careful. Is it illegal to run Nmap? No. But what you learn from Nmap, such as vulnerable hosts, anything like that, that you follow through on, that could be illegal. But even though it's not illegal, think ethics. Do we really want to set off alarm bells and scan someone's network without their permission? We shouldn't be doing that. It's not right. So here I'm going to do it on my own network, where it doesn't matter what I do. So I'm going to start by running the Nmap command, -v. Now the -v is for verbose. And I'm going to tell it a specific IP address. I could give it a network range, but I'm just going to tell it 192.168.4.1. Now, I happen to know that that is the IP address of my default gateway. And when I run that scan, we have a lot of output. We start getting some details about open ports that it's discovering, like port 53 for DNS, port 80 for HTTP, and it's discovering some other ports, such as 3001. It's going to discover all these ports that are listening on that device. And you can see why this is a network reconnaissance tool for malicious users. They are learning, first of all, that host is on the network, but they're also seeing that it's got a number of services running on them. Now we can take this a little bit further because we can also do OS fingerprinting. So for example, I'm going to press Control-C to stop that Nmap scan. I'm going to run Nmap ~O for OS fingerprinting, and let's run it against that same host, 192.168.4.1, my default gateway, my router on my network. So this time I'm wondering, well, what kind of an operating system is it? Is it a Windows host acting as a router? Is it a Linux host? Is it an embedded version of the Linux OS burned in at the hardware level into a wireless router? Like, what is it? Well, we'll begin to learn more once we get the output from our OS fingerprinting scan. Okay, so once we have the scan output, we have not only a listing of port information, so we see DNS, we see HTTP, UPnP, Universal Plug and Play, which is notorious for being turned on when it doesn't need to be and being an attack vector. Also, down below, I see that it's running a Linux 3.x or 4.x kernel. So I'm learning quite a bit about this. This doesn't feel like it's a router that's configured within an operating system like Windows or Linux, because we've got a couple of extra ports like Universal Plug and Play that are not normally enabled with those types of things, but is enabled with consumer-grade, cheaper routers. So that's kind of what we're learning here. But at the same time, for all we know, this is a honeypot. It could be a decoy or fake device that someone set up to see what would happen when attackers try to scan it and so on. So you never really fully know just based on this kind of output. However, let's take a look at the Nmap front-end GUI, which does pretty much what we're doing, but presents it in a graphical format. So what I want to do from my start menu is search for Zen, Z-E-N, and there's the Nmap GUI. So let's go ahead and fire that up. And that's part of what I downloaded and installed. It installed both the Nmap command line tool as well as this, the Nmap front-end GUI. So from here, I can specify the target. Let's say 192.168.4.1. 192.168.4.5. I'm only scanning a couple of hosts. Now you can see it's generating the specific Nmap command line down below in the command field. The profile is set to intent scan, which takes a long time, so instead I'm just going to do a quick scan, and I'm going to click the scan button. So I'll be able to see the output as it starts moving along through each of those hosts to see what it's finding in the scan. Now what you can do is you can go to the Scans tab where you'll see any scans that are currently running, and you can actually remove a scan. Because what we're going to do is open up an existing scan file. From the scan menu, notice that you can save a scan. So once you've conducted the scan and it's taken a while and you've got your list, you can save it. But let's open up an existing one. So from the scan menu, I'll choose Open Scan, and I'm going to open my scan XML file that I've taken in the past. So this is the result. On the left, we get a number of hosts that were discovered based on the range that we asked for. So in this save scan file, I asked to scan a larger range of IP addresses on a different subnet. The cool thing is that we can analyze this later. And remember, you can scan networks outside of your local area network if you have consent to do so. So you can take a bunch of scans and save them as different files and analyze them at any time. If I were to select a particular host over on the left, on the right, I'll see any of the ports that are open on that host. In this case, port 22. That's telling me it's an SSH host, presumably Linux or some kind of a network appliance. Port 80, that implies a web server stack. Okay, so it's probably an embedded device with a management interface either over SSH or over HTTP, but we don't know unless we drill down a little bit further, such as doing OS fingerprinting, which was not done here in detail. The other thing that's interesting here is I can also go to the services button on the left. Maybe I don't care about individual hosts. What I'm looking for are services that are running on the network. So, JetDirect. That means we've got a network printer. When I select it, it gives me the IP address and the port number. Well, TCP port 9100 is normally what an HP JetDirect type of network printer listens on. But if that hardware hasn't been upgraded, if the firmware in the printing device hasn't been updated, there might be some known vulnerabilities to the point where I might even be able to scan whatever might have been left in the scanner tray. It could be a sensitive document for all we know. So there's a lot of potential attack vectors here. And this is good because when used legitimately, we can find these things out and solve those issues, implement security controls. I can even go to the topology tab where it tries to draw a little picture of all of the devices on the network, and I can click on them to kind of zoom in a little bit, although it is very small. But the colors are interesting because if I have, for example, green, what that usually means is I might have up to 3 open services on that host. Each circle represents a host. Where compared to red, that means I have 6 or more open services on that host. And the bigger the circle, the more the number of open services. So that's kind of the benefit of just quickly looking at the topology to give an idea of what kind of situations or problems you might have on your network with vulnerable hosts. So at this point in time, we know how to use the Nmap command line tool for network mapping, and we also know how to use the front-end Nmap GUI. This is one of those tools, remember, that you should run periodically to detect any changes on your network to make sure you're keeping your network as safe as possible.